Welcome to Chapter 3, where we are going to talk about the history of international sports business. We'll kind of walk through a variety of different topics, and so let's get into it. So when we talk about international sport business, there always has been, and always will be sports marketers. For example, in the ancient Greek games, which we'll get to here in just a minute, there were multi-day events. The wealthiest paid for water. So what would happen is people who were in lower social classes would walk up to people who are wealthy, and they would carry water buckets down to rivers and streams and bring that water back up, and the wealthier social classes would then pay them for that. It's your modern day concession stand. So even in the ancient Greek games, which is the foundation of much of our sports industry, there were avenues for revenue and revenue streams. So sports marketing is always a thing and always has been a thing. The original sports marketing model has a communication model has some roots in how we still do things today. That is word of mouth, or WOM. In today's society, we use a lot of word of mouth, or electronic word of mouth. That is social media and other types of broadband access. We even see in the ancient Greek games that thousands of people would attend the games, and they would do this without any media coverage or any marketing communications that were based on our electronic media today. And so we can learn from and see differences between our old Greek games and today's games. Looking at the difference between the modern and the ancient games would be those that are considered the Greek games, as well as we'll talk about the Roman era as well. But the biggest difference between the two is that there was not any best practices for marketing and managing the games. They had limited technology in the ancient games. There was no social media or any type of communication loop that can give feedback from spectators, except for word of mouth. And so really, to answer the question, why should we study or examine the history of sport, it comes to how does that help us as marketers? It's important to understand our foundation, where we came from, in order to build from it. So over the next few videos, we'll break it down and talk about a variety of things. Starting first with the ancient Greek games. Then we'll talk about ancient Rome and how things changed between those time periods. We'll talk about imperialism, and then we'll talk about a couple of case studies, one talking about the World Baseball, or Spalding's World Tour, and what we're terming baseball tourists, and then sports that got it right. So a couple of case studies in sport, looking at the history side of this. So let's jump into the ancient Greek games. The foundation of the ancient Greek games were founded on religion. Many of them were surrounded this idea of honoring the Greek god of Zeus. And many of the religious festivals are still seen in today's society. Look at the Athens Greek Games in 2004. We saw olive wreaths as an example of a symbol of peace. What happened in the Greek games is that many of the different sections of Greece would be at war with other elements and within each other, and essentially, because of the games, a decree was called, and these different groups weren't actually in battle, so they'd have a peacetime in order to hold the games. And again, it all surrounded the worshiping of the Greek god Zeus. There were other gods that were involved in it, Athena being one of those. If you look at, these are just some pictures or renderings of things. The first top right is the ancient Olympia in Greece. This was then in 1906, the Olympic Stadium in Athens, Greece. You can see on the bottom left. And then again in 96 in Athens. I said 2004 a minute ago. I meant 96. But all of it, we saw that the foundation of it was that these sports were actually a form of worship for their society. And actually, Olympia was considered a religious center, and everything that came from it was based on this religious act. The Olympic facilities, you can see the sanctuary there in the picture, and on the bottom is actually what we would consider, or is considered, the original Olympia Stadium. It was, again, these stadiums were built as an extension of the religious sanctuaries as it relates to Zeus, and was the first time we started to see facilities built solely around sporting events. So there were hostels, there were altars that were created as part of the sporting activities, and there were training facilities, all in this one complex. You can even see the shape, which my head's kind of in the way, but you can see the shape of the facility of the original Olympic Stadium in ancient Greece was in a U-shaped stadium, which we see today in many of our track and field events. The foundations came from that, as well as the amphitheater-style seating. In this circumstance, is just a grassy area where people would sit and be able to see the playing field. In ancient Greece, the facilities were not much different than the Roman games in that a lot of it had social class as well as gender issues. Most women were not allowed to participate or even watch the games, except for the priestess, of course. There were separate events held there. It had events that have still held today: boxing, wrestling, horse racing, the pentathlon, which is still today, and other running events. And there was arguably 50 to 60, or estimated 50 to 60,000 visitors that would come to this multi-day festival, and many of them would sleep outside. Obviously, the wealthy would have tents, and others would just sleep out in the open. The main events that the ancient Greece events held were the running events. There were also physical contact sports, where we still see today: boxing, pancration, which is the closest thing we have to what is mixed martial arts today. It's a combination of wrestling and boxing, and then wrestling itself. The pentathlon, which included the long jump, the discus, the javelin, wrestling, and other running events. We see similarities in that today. And then also riding events, because that was also considered part of the training for people of the time. So which brings us to our discussion and what your assignment is for this first part of the class. How do you define this term amateur? Because a lot of Olympic games are considered amateur athletes. Ancient Olympians in Greece were considered amateurs, but they weren't. They were given meals for life if they won. The medals themselves that they were given later on in the Olympic stages were made of gold, which is a form of payment. And so the way we would actually define an amateur is somebody who is not paid for their services. Someone who is paid for their service would be considered a professional. Yet in today's society, Olympism is considered to be amateurism. If you start to pay athletes, the question is, well, if you start to pay them, they're no longer amateurs and they're professionals, and therefore we have this negative connotation that goes with it. And so what your assignment is to go in and choose one of these next few discussion, and you'll see that in the discussion section. But in topic 1 that you can select, answer these questions. Should Olympic athletes be paid by their home nation? Should the IOC, which is the International Olympic Committee, pay athletes? Or should they keep their current distribution of revenues in place? Currently, the distribution of revenues for the IOC primarily goes back to the development of the sports around the globe. That is education for youth, as well as opportunities, facilities, and equipment that's provided to them. So it's money that's spent back into supporting the sport itself around the globe, and that doesn't go back to the individual athletes. The question, or at least the issue you might have with the first topic, or first question of this topic, is should they be paid by their home nation? If so, do all nations have the same ability to pay their athletes as others? Those are things to consider. The second discussion topic has to do with Olympic sponsorship, which again is one of the largest revenue sources for the IOC. It reached 3.6 billion people in the 2012 London Games, and the sponsorship program, which is called the TOP program, which is the TOP, the Olympic Partnership Program, earned almost $1 billion from the 2009-2012 period on that Olympiad, and 90% of that revenue from Olympic sponsorships, according to the IOC, goes back to promoting worldwide development of sports. We'll talk about more of what these things mean later on in the Olympics chapter. But the NOC, which is the National Olympic Committee, which is based on individual nations. So in the United States, we have the USOC, which is the United States Olympic Committee. So the NOCs around the world receive funds from these sponsorship deals. The IFs, which are international federations. International federations are organizations that regulate and promote individual sporting events. So you have the International Archery Federation. In other words, international federations are those that are specific to sports. And then the OCOGs, which is the Organizing Committee for the Olympic Games. So the Organizing Committee for the Olympic Games. Their job is to promote the games in the cities in which they occur, both the Winter and Summer Olympics. So 90% of all the sponsorship revenue, that almost $1 billion, goes back to these three organizations. And so it goes back to the question is, should the IOC pay athletes, or should they keep their current revenue in place? And would this change the brand image of the Olympic Games? So if you pick that topic, that's the question to answer. The third one and the last topic that you can pick and to have a discussion about deals with the funding of athletes itself. And so if you look at some examples, for example, the Jamaican bobsled team, which was made famous in the movie Cool Runnings, but in the most recent games, I believe in Sochi, they themselves went through crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is an ability to ask a lot of people for small donations, and they raised over $150,000 so that their Jamaican bobsled team can go to the Olympic Games. Lindsey Vann, which is a U.S. ski jumper, used the same thing to try to pay for equipment, and she raised about $20,000 through crowdfunding. Usain Bolt, who is a very well-known athlete, makes $20 million a year just in endorsements. $9 million of that comes from Puma. Michael Phelps is $7 million. Lolo Jones, $2.7 million. And so there's a lot of variety in how much athletes are paid and how they are paid, whether they're out there trying to find their own funding, whether they're paid for by corporate partners, or the USOC providing, or sorry, the National Olympic Committee, in our circumstance, the USOC, and their funding. And so the question is, should athletes be able to make money through sponsorship deals? And does this make them professionals? Which the follow-up question to that is, do you believe that issues of amateurism are a problem for United States consumers? I think that was cut off in this, which you could see here. But you believe that amateurism is a problem in the United States consumers of the game? Is it a problem globally? So these are the questions you want to answer in the third discussion. But regardless of the discussion that you pick, the point of the whole thing, the point of each of these discussions is that marketers should be aware of how governing bodies' policies, that is the IOC and their revenue distribution, how these policies impact how consumers view the purity of international competition, whether it be the Olympic Games, whether it be a for-profit organization such as the NBA or NFL. How does brand image and what is the brand image and how is it impacted by the flow of money? And that's basically what these discussions are about.